Hi, everyone, and welcome to Behind the Numbers. My name is Dave Bookbinder, and welcome to the show where we dig deeper to understand what really matters most in business. One of the things that really matters most in business, of course, if you've listened to this program before, is leadership. And today we're going to have a great conversation on that topic. I'm pleased to welcome Thomas Gelmi, who's an executive and leadership coach. He's also a best-selling author. Thomas, hey, welcome to Behind the Numbers.
Thank you so much for having me and for inviting me to the show, Dave.
It's my pleasure. Why don't you tell the audience a little bit about who you are, introduce yourself, and then we'll get started.
Yeah, all right. I am 56 years old now. I refer to it as level 56. And I'm based in Switzerland, in the heart of Europe, from where I work with leaders internationally, supporting them in developing the crucial necessary skills for being effective in leadership. I've been doing this for more than 20 years now. And I have a very colorful career. So I do not come from an academic background at all. I earned my first money cutting people's hair. Then I worked for a circus for a couple of years. And then I spent a long time working for the former Swiss national airline called Swissair. And I was leading cabin crew on international flights. Where I learned a lot about what works in human interaction and what doesn't, and of course also about leadership. So that's me in a nutshell.
Yep, and one of your books is kind of the story about leadership development through the
Yeah,
cabin experience that you had. And
yeah,
if we have time, I'm sure we're going to get into that here. But I
sure.
wanted to kick things off by making an observation about the first thing I learned about you when I visited your website, which says, "Think human, act human, be human. Why humanity in the workplace pays off."
Yeah,
Um, very, very succinctly put. But let's unpack each of them if it makes sense to do that. What does it mean to be thinking human?
yeah. It means that I include human aspects or the fact of being human into my thinking. For example, as a leader, right? Most leaders I work with are very performance and numbers driven, right? Out of their own volition or because they're under a lot of pressure to meet goals and KPIs, et cetera, et cetera. And many of the things I talk about in my speeches or in my programs or in my coaching sessions could be, in a way, considered common sense, right? If you think about it for a moment, that you should be listening to someone with the intention to understand when they're trying to explain something to you, common sense, right?
Sure.
The challenge is that in organizations, when we look into organizations, how people work together, how leaders are driving things forward with a lot of pressure and energy, this common sense is not so common, unfortunately, right? So if you just observe a little bit how people behave in meetings, many listen to answer, or they listen to be right, or they even listen to win instead of listening to really, really genuinely understand what the other person is trying to tell you, if we stick to that example. So thinking human means I I have it, I carry it in my awareness that showing a human side, which includes emotions, etc., is not a hindrance, is not a disturbance to achieving the goals. It is a means to achieving even better results. And it is, in many cases, a game changer for productivity and profitability. So to just include this in my mindset, in my way of thinking, that's what it
Yeah,
means.
and you're spot on. It so much of it is really just common sense and decency and courtesy and treat people like
Yeah.
people and how you would want to be treated, courtesy, respect, and so forth. But something happens when leaders show up at work and they get the head
Yeah.
trash of what's
Yeah.
expected of them in their role, in their persona as leader, as opposed to
Yeah.
in their human skin, if you will.
Yeah.
Um,
Exactly.
Talk to me about what act human means. And I think you sort of touched on it when you alluded to things like
Mm.
vulnerability and maybe
Mm.
empathy, but why don't you explain
Mm.
that?
Well, it's the second step. because I have the mindset and it has a presence in my thinking. I'm aware of the importance. I can act upon it, which means, for example, I do take time to have conversations with my people. Often I hear from leaders, yeah, I don't have time for this. I don't have time for that human stuff.
Right.
Well, of course you don't have time, because when do we have time? Never. Yeah, it's not that you find time suddenly. Oh, there's time. I could do something with it. That's not how it works. We need to take time for these crucial interactions with our people, showing that we care about them, about their success, but also about them as human beings. And when do you take time for something? Usually when it's important. Right?
Sure.
So it all begins with the importance I give to these things. And I just recently had a conversation in a group of leaders I worked with, where somebody really said, I could never imagine just calling someone from my team to ask how they're doing without having an agenda, without having a concrete, tangible outcome of the call. And then it got very quiet in the room for a moment. And everybody was looking at him, and you could see people thinking, oh, how is it for me? Would I? And then we had a beautiful discussion, beautiful, very fruitful conversation that resulted in him saying, well, I might call my people every now and then just to ask how they're doing, because I'm showing that I care. And there's this beautiful quote by Theodore Roosevelt, who said about 100 years ago, people don't care how much you know before they know how much you care. And he was so
Exactly.
spot on with that,
Absolutely.
right? Mm-hmm. So acting upon it means, creating opportunities to foster a climate of humanity and trust, and connect with people really on a relationship basis.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's awkward to think, yeah, I'm going to just pick up a phone and check in on somebody or stop into somebody's office with no agenda. Um, what's it like on the receiving end, right? So if it's like the first time you've done this as a leader, I'm going to
Yeah.
check in. Now you show up in somebody's doorway and you're interrupting them ostensibly, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, what do you want? Why are you here? Well, what's this all
Mm.
about?
Yeah, and if you start doing it in an extreme way, like from 0 to 100 in a day, like in terms of change, you may encounter people who ask, well, what happened? Did you attend a course or something, and now you're trying something new on me? Because if you never come to ask how I'm doing, and so the key is often fine tuning and baby steps, small changes here and there, right? Make it start asking people how they're doing when you coincidentally meeting them first, for example, right? Instead of going to everyone on a daily basis and asking how they're doing, everybody is going to scratch their head. What's happened?
Yeah.
Right? So make it natural, make it yours, your style of asking, of caring, of showing that you care, and just throw it in here and there in a very natural way. That would be
Yeah.
my recommendation if somebody's not doing any of that at all.
Let me juxtapose something with you on the acting natural and being genuine and authentic in
Yeah,
your caring
yeah,
and consideration as
yeah.
compared to having a scheduled check-in. I'm going to check in with someone every week, every other week, Tuesday at 3 p.m.
Mm.
How does that feel? How does that land relative to the impromptu, I'm going to just pop in whenever I feel like it?
You mean how does it land if you just
If you're doing it by a
in?
regimen, it's a scheduled check-in. I'm going to
I
ask you
see.
how you're
Yeah,
doing every Tuesday at 3 p.m. or
yeah.
maybe every other Tuesday.
Yeah, of course, if it's a jour fix, it's scheduled, it's part of a regular interaction, it may have much less of an effect, of an impact, because people would assume that you're asking this question because it's just part of the agenda, right? It's
Yeah.
just part of being polite. But if you throw it in here and there, at the end of a meeting, let's say you had a difficult conversation with a team member that was not scheduled, that was ad hoc because of an important issue, And at the end of the meeting, you just ask them, hey, Paul, how was that for you? How do you feel now? What's your emotional state that you're going
Yeah.
out with into doing what we just discussed? Because I really care about you. You might not have to say all of that, but in the intention that you're conveying, that is very, very powerful. Or small things like, hey, Paul, yesterday, what you did for Mike, the extra mile you went to support him, I saw it. And it made me proud. So thanks a lot for that. A small thing. That is
Yeah.
not a feedback. It's not specific, right? It's a form of praise. It's just showing that I see things and I'm paying attention and I'm really caring. You can make somebody's day with something like that, or you can really have a lasting impact on someone with such a small thing. I have grown managers, senior executives in my coaching that tell me, hey, my first boss 40 years ago, he said, fill in the blanks. And it gave me direction. I still remember it. So it's not to be underestimated what these little things can do for someone.
Yeah, Brene Brown talks about the small moments like you just alluded
Oh,
to, and
yeah.
I think one of the examples that she points out, it's if you have a coworker, for example, that calls out sick today because their kid is not well, and they come back tomorrow, the small check in on how's your child doing means so much in terms of building trust and commitment, and the
Yes.
emotional commitment to you as a leader and your organization.
Yes. Yes. And what you just described sounds like something that comes natural to most people under normal good weather conditions, when we're relaxed, when we really care, when we're in a good state, among friends, for example, right?
Yeah,
Now, in the business, we're often under pressure, and we're often in a form of stress, in a form of survival mode, in fight, flight, or freeze mode. And that's the challenge, that in this stress mode, we don't necessarily have the resources to ask these questions or even think of asking such a question. So it
yeah.
takes that's why it takes a decision and a clear intention to start doing it.
Yeah, clear
Yeah. Yeah.
intention. That's the thing that I hear all the time from leaders. It's you've got to be intentional about doing this.
Yes.
And speaking of doing this and the leadership thing, if you will, Thomas, the outcome of that is to create a great culture where people want to come back
Mhm.
to work tomorrow and the day after and so forth.
Mhm.
Um, from your lens, what is culture and how do we build it?
Okay. Culture is not what's on display in the company on the nice shiny boards where it says these are our values, this is our culture, this is what it looks like. Culture is how we do things, how we interact with each other. And culture is what happens in these micro moments, micro
Mhm.
interactions, the experiences we have when we talk to each other, when we interact with each other. The reaction I get from my boss when I say, hey, I made a mistake, something happened, can we talk about it? The first reaction, is it rolling the eyes? Is it again? Or is it really openness and caring and say, okay, let's talk. What happened? Explain to me. This is culture. And somebody recently said culture is how your people feel on Sunday evening with
Great
regards
point.
to Monday. It's all in there, really. And culture is important. Culture eats strategy for breakfast, as we have heard multiple times already. It's
Yeah,
true. It's true. And how do we foster a culture of trust or psychological safety or whatever? It should be moment by moment, one conversation at a time, and starting with ourselves as leaders. It's a process, right? It's not a light switch where we say, okay, we announce that from now on we have such and such a culture, and we put on the nice boards in the meeting rooms, and then that's the light switch on. That's not how
Yep.
it works.
I'm going to try and tee you up here to hit one out of the ballpark, as we say, because you alluded to trust and psychological safety. And both of those are key components in building an employee's emotional connection to the firm, i.e., their level of engagement. It's documented. There's empirical data that speaks to that, and there's more data that speaks to when you've got employees that have that commitment and they're committed to the culture and they're engaged. They're going to give you the discretionary effort. They're going to go above and beyond,
Yeah.
and it's going to result in greater profitability, greater business value. Which is here's where I'm teeing you up perfectly, because your website talks about why humanity in the workplace pays off.
Yeah.
Tell us why.
Yeah. Because focusing on the people will have an effect on the numbers, on the hard facts, on the KPIs, on the profitability, productivity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's, one of the nicest moments I had a while ago was at the end of an executive coaching program with 11 executives that went to the program together. And at the end, we did a final resume workshop where we spoke about the key takeaways and key moments, key learnings. And one guy said, the most important thing I learned in this program is that you can improve the financial figures of the company by not focusing on the numbers, but by focusing on the people, truly, genuinely focusing on the people. I got goosebumps when I heard that because he really understood it. He got it. And the challenge with that is, of course, that the so-called hard facts often have a number to it. You can measure them, right? And that makes it more tangible and easier, of course. And by the way, they are also usually what leaders are measured by. Their success is measured by the achievements, the concrete, tangible results. And then
Right.
we have these soft factors, right? Some people call them soft skills that are needed for that. I don't like the term. I prefer calling them essential skills because they are,
Yeah.
that are less tangible. It's a bit wishy-washy, right? How can I measure it? Ideally, you can attach a KPI to it. For example, if employee morale goes up, absenteeism goes down. So people call in sick much less. And the other way around, of course. When the climate is bad, we have a climate of psychological threat or whatever it may be. People may call in sick more often. So that's one number. And there are various other KPIs related to employee engagement. I personally refer to it as the emotional balance sheet, like the bank account you have with your assets, with your money. What's the emotional balance sheet of any relationship you have at work, with your boss, with your coworkers, with any other stakeholders? Any of these relationships has an emotional value. Or any situation or event like a meeting, a team meeting. What's the emotional balance sheet of that team meeting? As in, what's the emotional climate? If the emotional balance sheet is in the plus, meaning we have predominantly positive emotions in place, such as feeling respected, feeling heard, feeling seen, feeling safe to speak up and say what's on my mind, we see trust, we see collaboration, extra miles, etc., etc.
Yeah.
If the balance sheet is in the minus, in the red, or running within the credit limit, we could say, people don't feel respected. They don't feel like their contribution or their opinion really counts. They may even feel threatened at times. So it's not safe. We see mistrust, competition, pushback, resistance, silo thinking, and rule book slowdown, meaning people just do what they have to do so that they don't run into trouble, but not an inch more than that.
Right.
Right. So it is all directly tied. And you mentioned the various studies that really show the tangible measurable outcome of all of that. So there's a business case,
Oh yeah,
definitely.
for sure. One of the other
Mm.
things I like to talk about too, when you talk about people staying, the retention statistic, um,
Yeah.
your employees can either be evangelists for you or they can destroy you, right? They can go out onto things like Glassdoor, trash your organization,
Yes.
or they could
Yeah.
be your best recruiter and telling people
Yeah.
what a great place it is to work. So
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
real cost in replacing your employees that we can certainly explore another time. We don't have time to dig deep here,
Yeah.
but I've covered that on a number of shows, and I think folks
Hmm.
sort of get
Hmm.
that already. But I want to get to maybe a practical application if you could share with the folks who are out there listening. You work with a lot of leaders, and they come in with a variety of things that they're not doing wrong. They're trying to change behaviors. Are there common themes that you've seen in terms of things that people are doing wrong, if you will? And are there any fixes that you may be able to share here that people can take away as an
Hmm.
actionable
Hmm.
thing, maybe even
Hmm.
do as soon as they're done
Yeah.
listening?
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for the question because it's a very relevant one. And there is like one major thing I keep seeing that has to do with a very human thing, a very human phenomenon, which is called the negative bias. What does that
Mm,
mean? It means that anything we perceive as problematic or negative attracts our attention automatically. It's drawn there. And it seems bigger and more important, and we react more strongly to it um, compared to all the things that are going well and all positive aspects. This is not wrong. It's very human and it has to do with survival. It's very, very old, right? So our ancestors who went hunting, they had to pay attention for potential threats much more than to the fact that the weather is nice and the sky is blue. Who cares, right? And we still have this ingrained in our DNA. It's very, very deeply rooted, which leads to managers, leaders being in problem solving mode all day long. And you walk through the company and you see everything that's not going well, everything that needs to be changed, everything that's a problem or an issue and needs to be resolved, which is not wrong. Of course, it's part of the job to get problems out of the way. However, we are giving away a lot of potential if we are in this negative bias problem solving mode. And that's all the things that are going well and all the things that people are doing well that we may be taking for granted. That is one of the biggest, if you want to call it mistake, yeah, involuntary mistake that I see managers doing, which results into managers giving more critical or corrective, some call it negative feedback to their employees than positive in reinforcing feedback. People tell me, oh, I only hear from my boss when something goes wrong. If everything goes well, I don't hear anything from him or her. And I usually tell them, yes, it's not bad intention, believe me. It's due to this negative bias or problem solving mode. Now, what can we do about this?
yeah.
If we know that the emotional balance sheet is important and it should be kept in the positive, giving more recognition and praise to people for things they're doing well and extra miles they're going is one key thing to do. But because it doesn't come so naturally, we have to make a conscious decision. And again, as you said earlier, be intentional about it. So I often encourage leaders to make a decision in the morning to pay attention to what people are doing well and to extra miles people are going or extra efforts people are demonstrating and are doing. And then whenever when you spot something like that and you think, oh, that's nice, that's good, you go the final step and tell them, like I gave an example earlier,
Right.
right? That is the thing to do. It takes a conscious decision, and the good news is it only takes a conscious decision until it doesn't anymore, because it has become a habitual way of looking at people and into the organization. You've created a habit of always also seeing what's going well and appreciating it and celebrating the successes, even the smallest, you know, and that makes a huge difference.
Yeah, that's a great mindset shift. And I
Mm-hmm.
think it's also been referred to as something like the looking for the list of positive aspects, right? So
Yeah.
if you go looking for negative, you're going to find negative. If you go looking for positive, you'll find negative. And one of the analogies you always hear, or I always hear, is um, as you go through your day when you're driving to work, for example, look for the red car. How many red cars do you see, right? And you can go through this exercise blindly without even thinking about it every day, never notice a red car. But as soon as you set an intention to look for red cars, all of a sudden there's red cars everywhere. Um,
Exactly. It happens
so
all the time. Yeah.
if you look for it, you'll find it.
Yes.
That's fascinating mindset shift. Thomas, we're getting down to the end of the line here, but I want to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about your book, What Cabin Crews Can Teach Us About Leadership.
Yeah, it's a book I wrote a few years ago with the intention to summarize all the things that I deem effective and important in leadership, in collaboration, and in customer interaction. Because the principles are the same, regardless of whether you're leading people or you're talking to an important customer. It's about influencing, it's about connecting, it's about keeping relationships. And so I had the intention to summarize this. And then I thought, hey, why not link it to one of my most important experiences, my time at Swissair. So I used the work of cabin crew in a plane up in the sky with 300 people in a narrow tube as a metaphor. As a metaphor, because you have in that environment all three aspects. You have leadership, you have teamwork, and you have customer interaction on a very narrow room.
Yeah, and I would also say
And
I would add psychological safety as well.
oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And you also run into issues and problems and conflicts, right? Without the ability to call for external help, you cannot call the police or anyone. You have to solve issues on the spot immediately and by maintaining the relationship ideally, right? Because you can also not necessarily escalate without end, right? You
Right.
have certain limitations, so you have to be very um, solution focused, constructive, and maintaining the relationship, which is a challenge. And the work of cabin crew is very often underestimated with this regard. These people are often very well trained in this regard, also for extreme situations. So I brought these two things together, and out came the book with the title Breakthrough.
Wonderful. I want you to tell the audience where they can get the book and how they can find you if they want to connect with you, learn more about you, work with you.
Yeah, thank you. The book you can get on Amazon or you reach out to me and I'll send you a copy. I'll be happy to do so. You find me online on my website. It's gelmi.com. It's pronounced Gelmi, but written with a G. And you can find me on LinkedIn, TikTok, Instagram, all the usual social media channels. Reach out to me. I'm happy to assist.
That's wonderful. Time goes very quickly here on Behind the
It
Numbers,
does.
Thomas. Unfortunately, we are out of time, but I can't thank you enough for joining us today. Really appreciate your insights.
Likewise. Thank you so much, Dave.
My pleasure. We've been talking with Thomas Gelmi about leadership and how it impacts the organization. My name is Dave Bookbinder, and I'm known as a business valuation expert. I help my clients in valuing their businesses and intellectual property assets. If you're a business owner and you don't know the value of your business, we should probably have a conversation. Can't thank you folks out there for listening to this program. We can't do it without your support and know that it is very much appreciated. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please leave a review, share the episode, tell a friend. All those things helps to grow the program's audience and reach. That's all we have for today, gang. We'll see you next time on Behind the Numbers. Take care.